Tonight on Steelers Talk, we have the latest Steelers coaching news as head coach Mike McCarthy has made a couple more hires. He's done a couple more interviews, and they've even hired a coach that might ruin their chances of bringing back Aaron Rodgers in 2026. Then we'll get into the latest wide receiver rumors when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Does Roman Wilson want out? And there's another wide receiver, a popular one, on the free agency market that has been linked to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're just going to jump right into the content here today, guys, as Scott Tolzien, the Saints quarterbacks coach, was in Pittsburgh today to interview for our offensive coordinator opening, and there's definitely a lot of rumors out there that this is all but a done deal. This is kind of similar to the Patrick Graham situation where he's heavily linked to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is expected to get done at some point, even though it's not finalized yet. Steelers DB on Twitter, Derek Bell from Steelers Now, it's great follow on X, by the way. He predicted the Patrick Graham hiring, and he put this out over the weekend, and he says Scott Tolzien will be the Steelers' next offensive coordinator. And personally, I trust DB's judgment on that, and if he's saying it's happening, I think it's going to happen, guys. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button for our breaking news video on Scott Tolzien becoming the next offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers when and if that news hits. Really do appreciate all of your guys' support. We can continue on here with some other coaching news updates for the Pittsburgh Steelers that happened over the weekend and over the last few days, where the Pittsburgh Steelers lost their DB coach, Gerald Alexander, to the Minnesota Vikings, and Brian Flores, where Flores hired him to be their next pass game coordinator there in Minnesota, which is a very coveted job because Durante Jones, the previous pass game coordinator in Minnesota, just got hired as a defensive coordinator. So not only is this a promotion for Gerald, who's a really good coach, but also, there's definitely upward momentum there with that Minnesota team working for Coach Flores. So Gerald could be into the DC conversations as early as next offseason. But that's a pretty big loss for the Steelers, in my opinion, guys. I thought he did a really good job with the DBs last year, specifically guys like James Pierre and Joey Porter Jr., turning those guys into legitimate pieces. Brandon Echols had a really good year as well. I think he handled the transition of Jalen Ramsey from nickel corner to safety somewhat well. He got Kyle Duggar, who was ineffective with the Patriots, to play pretty well here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, certainly the secondary wasn't perfect for the Steelers last year, but I thought Alexander did a good job elevating the group in 2025, and I think we're going to miss him moving forward. In terms of the guy that's going to be replacing him as the DB's coach here in Pittsburgh, it's going to be Jason Simmons, somebody that actually interviewed for the defensive coordinator job here in Pittsburgh, and he was hired, expecting to be the pass game coordinator, and he still might be, but with Alexander leaving, Simmons will take on the responsibilities of the DB coach. Also, the Pittsburgh Steelers have hired their next special teams coordinator, and it's Danny Crossman, formerly with the Miami Dolphins. Now, another guy, with Pittsburgh ties, it's just becoming a meme at this point that McCarthy's, hiring, the Steelers are a mom and pop shop that are just hiring, the guys that they know. And honestly, I'm not in love with this hire. If I'm being completely honest with you, Crossman has been somebody that's been known as one of the worst special teams coordinators in the league for a very long time. He got demoted and eventually fired from the Miami Dolphins because, his special teams groups under his tenure there in Miami and Mike McDaniel were just not very good at all. So I don't love this hire whatsoever. And it's really the first one that I look at and I'm like, man, this is a big downgrade from what we had before, especially because we're losing one of the best special teams coordinators in football in Danny Smith going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, hopefully this doesn't have a giant effect on the Steelers special teams. I know Mike McCarthy has been kind of known for some poor special teams kind of teams, especially in his time in Green Bay. A little bit better when he had Bones Fassel in Dallas, but who's one of the best special teams coordinators in the game. But this one's got me a little bit worried, guys. I'm not going to lie with Crossman coming in, but I am wishing him the best of luck as the next special teams coordinator of the Steelers. He certainly has big shoes to fill. Then we get to some other coaching news for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've interviewed C.J. Ayu, the outside linebackers coach for the Texas Tech Red Raiders. He helped coach guys like Jacob Rodriguez and David Bailey there with Texas Tech. He's very much beloved there at Texas Tech, and I think that he would be a really good hire if they end up bringing him in for sure. They also interviewed Chase Haslett, the tight ends coach there in New Orleans under Kellen Moore, for the same position here in Pittsburgh, as well as the pass game coordinator role. He's 33 years old, very young, coach that, I'm sure would love some upward mobility here in Pittsburgh. And then they hired Frank Cignetti Jr. in an offensive role here in Pittsburgh, coming over from IUP, where he was the offensive coordinator. And Frank was actually a former offensive coordinator under Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. A Pitt native, and he's actually the brother to Indiana's Curt Cignetti, their head coach. So, there are some rumors of Cignetti potentially being a fit at head coach here in Pittsburgh because he's from Pittsburgh, all that different stuff. But Frank is also from Pittsburgh. He coached at Pitt a few years back, and now he's returning to Pittsburgh to coach under Mike McCarthy. But this might be a problem for the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially if their plan is to bring back Aaron Rodgers like we think it is, because apparently Cignetti didn't have a great relationship with Rodgers when he was the offensive coordinator there in Green Bay in 2018, to the point where Rodgers wouldn't even talk to Cignetti apparently, and he'd have to go through a surrogate just to communicate with him. It apparently got that bad because Rodgers was apparently pissed that Mike McCarthy fired Alex Van Pelt, the previous offensive coordinator there in Green Bay, that offseason, and Rodgers, his relationship with Mike at that point certainly started to deteriorate, and that extended into his relationship with Frank Cignetti Jr., where he apparently refused to talk to Cignetti as the offensive coordinator of the team. This report comes from Aaron Nagler from Cheesehead TV, so take this with a grain of salt or take it for what you will. But he said back in the day, fun story, Rodgers was so pissed that McCarthy let Van Pelt walk. He refused to speak to Cignetti, for who much of the year had to relay anything he wanted to say to Rodgers through Boyle. Good times. And Nagler actually posted today, I guess this takes away any chance of Rodgers going back to the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. So that really does beg the question, does hiring Frank Cignetti Jr., somebody that apparently Rodgers isn't the biggest fan of, ruin the Steelers' chances of bringing back Aaron Rodgers? We've heard it from Mike McCarthy himself. His plan is to bring back Aaron Rodgers this year. So, certainly this would be a big mistake from McCarthy if bringing in Cignetti ends up costing them their plan A at the quarterback position. But honestly, guys, I don't think it costs them Aaron Rodgers. I think if Rodgers decides to retire, it'll be for reasons outside of Frank Cignetti Jr. because, plain and simply, he won't be really interacting with him every single day like he had to there in Green Bay. Rodgers would be working, with obviously McCarthy, whose relationship with it has really been repaired over the years, and then also Scott Tolzien, I'm guessing, will be the OC, but whoever the offensive coordinator is, that's who he'll be interacting with every day, as well as the quarterback's coach, Tom Arth. He won't really be interacting with Cignetti, so as long as the relationship isn't at a point where Rodgers just refuses to be in the same space as him, I think if Rodgers wants to come back, he will this season. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. What is the percent chance that Aaron Rodgers returns to the Steelers this season? Put it on a scale of 0 to 100 for me down there in the comment section. This will be the pinned comment on today's show. So in just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And while I tell you about our sponsor, give me a number between 0 and 100. And with that, let's have word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And the big game in Santa Clara between the Seahawks and Patriots is almost here, guys. And there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than with Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, that also means it's your last chance to get into the football action before next year. So close the season out right with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. This week, Prize Picks has a special max discount for the big game live in the app right now. Drake May just needs one passing yard for the max discount to win. Just add another player to your lineup, and if your picks hit, you can cash in. You guys can check out my Prize Picks lineup here for the big game in Santa Clara. I'm taking the more on Cooper Kupp receiving yards. I'm taking the less on JSN receiving yards and the less on Ramondre Stevenson rushing yards. So you guys can download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Now, Mark Kaboly, correspondent for the Steelers for the Pat McAfee Show, said on his podcast that Roman Wilson, Steelers wide receiver, won't want a Rodgers return this year. And apparently, he doesn't want Aaron Rodgers throwing him passes in 2026 for what he claims are obvious reasons. This is what Kaboly had to say about the situation. What I may or may not have heard is Roman Wilson might not be very happy that Aaron Rodgers is coming back. I mean, I didn't hear this from Roman, but I think we can put 1 and 1 together and get 2. So he's essentially saying it's like common knowledge that Roman Wilson, doesn't want to play with Aaron Rodgers next year. Now listen, man, would I be shocked if Roman Wilson decides to, ask a trade away from the Pittsburgh Steelers if Aaron Rodgers is coming back? It wouldn't necessarily surprise me. It certainly wouldn't be the first time where a young receiver failed to connect with Aaron Rodgers and, said if he comes back, I want out. Garrett Wilson apparently was this way with the New York Jets, just a season ago. And of course, Rodgers ends up leaving and they keep Garrett Wilson. But, Roman is somebody that, obviously didn't get the opportunities that he thought he was going to get last year. And they brought in replacements for him later in the season, Adam Thielen and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And he essentially got benched at the end of the year. And if Rodgers is coming back, I could see why he would want a fresh start. Because I'm sure that he still feels like he can be a contributor to an NFL offense. And you'd probably be worried that if Rodgers is back, that he's going to spend his third year in the National Football League, mostly on the bench like it's been the first 2 years of his career. But with that said, I could also see him being our version of Brandon Cooks next year. I mean, you look at what Brandon Cooks did with that Dallas Cowboys offense, specifically in 2023, where he could run those deep crossing routes, and he had solid hands, good route runner with some good speed, smaller guy, very similar type of skill set to Roman Wilson. And with Mike McCarthy coming in, who likes to run a lot more of those deep crossers compared to what Arthur Smith liked to run, I could see Roman Wilson having a role as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type in this Steelers offense. I think Roman, I would characterize him as a happy surprise kind of guy, where it's like you have him at the beginning of the season be either your wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. You don't rely on him to be your number 2 guy like you did last year, and you see what he can do, and you see if he can be a happy surprise for you, where he shows you that he has developed. I still think the Steelers need to add 2 bona fide starting talents to this wide receiver room this year, but Roman Wilson, he still has the talent and the ability, in my opinion, to be a version of Brandon Cooks in this Mike McCarthy style of offense. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. Will Roman Wilson be a Steeler next season? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. He's still got multiple years of rookie contract control, and the Steelers don't have a lot of people on their depth chart, heading into the offseason, a lot of free agents. So let me know what you guys think. Yes or no, will Roman Wilson be back next season? Now, somebody that they could add in free agency at the wide receiver position, and somebody you're going to hear get linked to the Steelers a lot in the coming weeks, is Romeo Doubs, former teammate to Aaron Rodgers, and Pro Football Focus has now linked the Packer receiver to the Steelers as a potential free agency target. This is what Bradley Locker from Pro Football Focus had to say about the pairing. With the Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy, the team will likely invest more in its offense as it attempts to better a unit that placed 20th in EPA per play in 2025. Finding a running mate for DK Metcalf would go a long way in doing so. Doubs has been a solid option over the last 3 seasons with a 78.6 PFF receiving grade. Since 2024, he also sits in the 75th percentile in receiving grade versus single coverage. The 25-year-old former Packer could reunite with Aaron Rodgers if he returns, and should have little trouble learning McCarthy's terminology, simply because, I'm sure a lot of what Rodgers ran in Green Bay, even during the LaFleur era, crossed over with the McCarthy stuff. So, learning the offense should be pretty easy, relatively speaking, for Romeo Doubs. And for me, guys, this one just makes too much sense, okay? Just everything lines up perfectly here with this fit. And obviously, Doubs has been a target for Aaron Rodgers, since last year, where he apparently called the Packers and Matt LaFleur himself to see what the availability of Romeo Doubs was before the season began. And Doubs is still young, just 26 years old. So if you sign him, he can be a long-term wide receiver 2 piece to pair alongside DK Metcalf here in Pittsburgh. And obviously, he still has that relationship with Aaron Rodgers. Doubs was a rookie back in 2022 in the final season of Aaron Rodgers' tenure there in Green Bay. And right now, Spotrac projects a contract of 4 years and just $12 million per season. Now, I actually think he's going to make more than that, especially with the NFL cap going up as much as it is this year. But, man, if you can get in that $12 to $15 million range for a guy as good as Romeo Doubs, that would be a phenomenal value for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And plain simply, guys, if Rodgers is going to return, he's going to need wide receivers that he has trust with to succeed. I mean, like he throws those back shoulder fades and all these different things to people that he trusts. And, there's a big reason why Roman Wilson didn't get on the field this year. It's why, really nobody outside of DK Metcalf was able to put up big numbers in the wide receiver room. So this one just makes a lot of sense from a Aaron Rodgers connection standpoint, but also Doubs' superpower is exactly what the Steelers need, which is one-on-one, man-to-man separation ability. And Doubs brings a nice pairing of size and route running, quick feet, really good technique getting open, and he has that established chemistry with Rodgers. So he would be, I would assume, Rodgers' safety blanket on third downs if he were to be signed here to Pittsburgh. And then also, if you get Romeo Doubs, it's not like Doubs is so good that it prevents you from taking a Mekhi Lemon or trading up for a Jordan Tyson or a Carnell Tate if those guys fall in the NFL draft this year. Or just sticking and picking for a guy like Denzel Boston or somebody like that. There's a lot of good receiving options for the Steelers to consider. And if you get Doubs, you don't have to be desperate to go get a wide receiver, but you also, don't feel like you have to necessarily get into a desperate mindset if Romeo Doubs ends up being your wide receiver 2 by the time you get to the draft. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Do you want Pittsburgh to sign Romeo Doubs in free agency? Give me an S for sign or P for pass. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments, and that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button and turn on those notifications, because if we officially hear word that the Steelers are hiring Scott Tolzien as their offensive coordinator, we're going to have a video for you guys ready when that news hits. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.